Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen, and we are here live to discuss things we wish we didn't have to discuss right now. But we're going to anyway, because this is why we're here. We're here to deal with the pain and talk you through the pain like good therapists. I'd like to think of the Cover One Roundup as sort of your weekly Bills therapy or shouting match, however you want to handle this. You know, so if you get a little spicy in here, and I appreciate that. I like mixing it up with some people. But regardless of all that, we're going to talk about Super Bowl a little bit. That won't be the focus of things, but we are going to talk about it. And we're going to prepare the rest of you fine, lovely folks for the offseason to come for the Buffalo Bills. And we're gonna kick it off shortly with the biggest news of the day. I promise we'll talk about that. But before we do all of that, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. You and I talked a little bit before the show. I took a little hiatus from Twitter the past week. It rejuvenated me more than I expected it would, and I came back to Twitter today. And it's like that GIF from Community, right, where the guy walks in with the pizzas and everyone's screaming at each other, everything's on fire. That's what it felt like outside of what we're going to talk about in a moment, but like just still people talking about firing certain coaches, cutting certain players, trading people for assets that they're simply not worth. Really fun start to my return to Twitter today.
So you say the meme from Community as though you've never watched Community. Have you seen Community?
I watched Community seems like it'd be right up my aisle. I watched like 5 episodes of it and was like, I don't know about this show.
See, this is how I feel about Letterkenny, where I'm like, I feel like if I watched this show, I would quote so much of it, and so much of it feels like right where my type of comedy lives, but it's simultaneously too fast and too slow at the same time. Like, all of the dialogue is like so rapid fire. That it's a little tricky to like keep up with the whole thing, but the show itself moves at such a slow pace. It's very odd, at least to me. Some people love it, my brother being one of them, but man, such is life. Not every bit of comedy is for everyone. Speaking of which, and as related to the upcoming Super Bowl, trying my best to just blitz through as much of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia before the Super Bowl starts and just get as much of that as I can. As a reminder, someone told us to switch, so we're gonna switch.
It's insane that show still is on air. I don't even know how many years it's been now. It's incredible. 20 years,
something like that. I think they're on like their 16th, 17th season or something like that. So yeah, it is what it is. Thank you to Jared K for reminding us to switch sides again. I feel like he's become our weekly like reminder on what side is which. You would think after years of doing this show, I would just know which side I'm supposed to be on, and I don't. That shows you where my priorities in life are. But thank you for reminding me and always knowing where we're supposed to be, because otherwise I would look back at this show and I'd be like, we're on the wrong side, and it's gonna look stupid. And now I look slightly less stupid. So, Teddy MV says, and yes, I'm salty as hell. I understand that. I understand that. I couldn't even tell you what specifically this is in relation to, but I understand. I get it. Ralph Wilson Sr. from the grave says they take a week off and already started on the wrong side. Here's the thing. Week off or not, I probably would have started on the wrong side. Let's be honest. It's not like this is an inconsistency sort of thing. This is just what it is. RJ says, I don't think I'm watching the Super Bowl this year. It'll be the first time since 10th grade where I had to work late and miss 90% of the Giants-Ravens Super Bowl. Well, I mean, that was a good Super Bowl to miss because that was just a giant blowout anyway. But this would be a good Super Bowl to watch. I think it'll be a good Super Bowl. I'm not saying the Eagles win, but I think it should be good. Daniel says, how much cap space will Bills gain when we cut Vaughn? Spin 0481 says 8 million, 17 million post June 1st. Post June 1st, of course, just creates more issues for next offseason et cetera, et cetera. RJ also adds on, my friends and I may instead get together for a giant game or a giant game night and just skip the game altogether. No one wants to watch this garbage game on Sunday. Okay, well, first of all, some people want to watch that garbage game on Sunday, including me, especially me. Go Birds. And that being said, giant game night with friends also sounds like a lot of fun. I do enjoy some good board games with friends, so I can't really back you on that too much. All right. So how do we start this? Because we could talk about the Super Bowl to start, but it sounds like a lot of people don't want to talk about the Super Bowl right now. So we could just kind of quickly go through that and then spend the rest of the time on Bills related stuff, or we could do a bunch of Bills related stuff and then we'll hit the Super Bowl at the end. What do you feel?
I say let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's talk about this game and then get into Bill stuff.
Okay. So before we get into that, though, we're going to talk about the thing that helps us and that I appreciate the most. I guess I'll say it. I appreciate it the most, which is Cover One Pass, folks. If you are not a Cover One Pass subscriber and you feel like, well, the Bill season is over, it's not worth getting One Pass out, I could not disagree with you more. In fact, this is probably one of the best times to get One Pass. Why? Because you get exclusive content, you get in-depth analysis, you get scheme, player breakdowns, scouting reports, analytics. I mean, Eric is already grinding the tape on free agents, on draft picks. I mean, he's got one for this big giant Oregon defensive tackle that's just sitting in one of the Discord channels. I'm telling you, this is the time of year. You've got people who are doing mock drafts. You got people talking about this Myles Garrett thing. You've got people discussing free agency and all this sort of stuff. It's all happening on the Cover One Discord. If you go to cover1.net, you pay $60 a year. It's the best $60 you'll spend on football all year. You'll get access to this great community where you can discuss all these different things. It is a great, great time. It's a great community, and it's the best money you'll spend on football, period. Cut and dry. Sign up today at cover1.net, and we'll all thank you because it's the most direct way to support us and the type of work that we do here at Cover One. And we are very grateful for all of you who are One Pass subscribers, and for those who are considering it, go for it. It's absolutely and totally worth it. All right. Let's see. Max Shoeshiner says, what's the swag on the chair? It's a great question. As part of Christmas, even though Christmas was almost 2 months ago, but my parents did get me a James Cook signed jersey, which will go next to the Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs jerseys, and which will give me one of each, a white away jersey, a blue home jersey, and a red Color Rush jersey. So
I thought that was as I was looking at it, I thought it was a Shane Falco jersey. If you know who Shane Falco is.
I know the name. I couldn't tell you which movie that particular fictional football player is from.
There you go.
Nor do I really care.
Okay.
So I'm sure the chat will have many things to say about that in the meanest way possible. So RJ says, you can make that graphic slightly smaller rather than having to dodge it on camera. So I agree. We could also make it bigger so we don't have to dodge it at all. Unfortunately, some people just didn't think about that. And I don't really have the abilities in Photoshop to really try and do that myself. I may try and spend time on it, maybe. But personally, I think the aesthetic of us trying to dodge our own graphic and only showing our heads on either side kind of fits with the overall vibe of the show. So I'm going to keep doing it until someone tells me that I literally shouldn't be doing it. More specifically, someone who may or may not pay me. It is what it is. All right, let's talk about this Super Bowl. So first of all, go Birds. For those that don't know, and I feel like I've talked about this several times before, and those who remember last year when the Bills played the Eagles in Philadelphia know I am also a Philadelphia Eagles fan. My mom is from Philadelphia. My dad is from Buffalo. This is where my sports fandom comes from. It's not just because I picked a random team or two in Madden and that was it. Although that seems to be a random thing that happens for people, right? It's just like, oh, that's just the team I played with in Madden. It's like, oh, weird. For me, I am looking forward to watching the Super Bowl, at least as much as anyone can look forward to playing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, which is to say, kind of, there is this sort of feeling of inevitability, and I wish that weren't the case when it comes to playing the Chiefs, but they've also won 15 games and could have won 16 games had they given any effort in the final week against Denver and the Broncos, but they didn't. So it's very difficult, and kind of linking some of this back to the Bills, right? There was a lot of, let's call it, predictable talk when it came to how certain people viewed Sean McDermott after this AFC Championship game loss to the Chiefs, feeling very frustrated, feeling very annoyed, feeling like, wow, why can't they just get past this Chiefs team? All that sort of stuff. And there were some people who were like, well, the Bills defense has always been the struggle. Like, the common denominator seems to be Sean McDermott. Maybe they should get rid of him. And it's like, okay, so that's a perfectly fine idea if you don't think about it for more than like 2 seconds, because if other coaches could beat the Chiefs in these situations, then why don't they?
Mm-hmm.
This team just won 15 games. They beat the Texans in the playoffs. They beat the Bills in the playoffs. They've beaten a whole host of teams in the playoffs. It's not just the Bills. It's not like the Bills are just like the one team they managed to beat all year in the postseason. That's not what this is about. Like, who has stopped the Chiefs other than one time when Lou Anarumo decided to just drop bait a bunch of times and fried Patrick Mahomes' brain? Guess what? If you did that now, Mahomes not going to have some like freaky meltdown like he did in that AFC Championship game. I can promise you that.
Yeah.
So where is it? Who's the coach? Who's the coach that would take it over the top? Who's the coach that could do it? You want to bring Bill Belichick in? Yeah? You want Matt Patricia or Josh McDaniels to be your offensive coordinator too? You want to ruin Josh Allen that way? I think it's ridiculous that this discourse continues. I understand that it's frustrating. I understand that it's irritating. I'm with you. I get it. I was extremely annoyed. I was probably the most mad I've been after a football game in a very, very long time. I say very long time, but it was probably last year when they like barely beat the Giants or lost to the Broncos in that stupid field goal fiasco. Regardless, that's not important. What is important is just sitting here and pretending like Sean McDermott is not a good coach, because he is. He's a very good coach. The problem is he's a 90, 95 sort of coach, and Andy Reid is a 99 head coach. Yeah. Steve Spagnuolo is a 99 defensive coordinator. Patrick Mahomes is a 99 quarterback. Yeah. This is what it is. It's unfortunate. It sucks. I don't like it. I wish it was a different era. I wish Mahomes had been drafted by someone else. That's not what happened. And we can't sit here and pretend that we're in some sort of multiverse and we get to choose whichever universe we can live in. It is what it is. It sucks. At some point, I believe that the Bills will take that next step. And for the people who are saying, well, there was no better chance to do it than this year. You know what? I heard that last year. And they were in the AFC Championship game this year. I heard that in 2021. I probably heard it in 2022.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. You have Josh Allen. and you have a really good team, there will be other chances. It sucks. I get it. I wish it was different. I really do. But making impulsive decisions is not the right way to go about this, because what's funny is like all of these people coming out of the woodwork and saying, oh, well, they should be doing this, they should be firing McDermott, they should be changing this, they should be doing that, blah, 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 blah. It's like you are all the same people who are making fun of Woody Johnson and Dave Tepper for being impulsive owners who don't give people their fair chances. And I understand McDermott's been here for a while. I get it. But like, this is not that different. This is, you got to be able to take a step back and say, this team can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not they will, I don't know. But they can do it. And it's not because the coaching is bad. We can sit here and say they got outcoached, sure. But by what degree? They lost by 3 points, right? 2 points, 3 points. I don't know. I think there's a lot of bad responses, and it's understandable to feel like there has to be someone to blame. It's a team game. We say this all the time. It's a team game, and the team lost. It's not because the coach was completely unprepared. It's not because the quarterback was bad. It's not because of one specific thing or one other specific thing. It is what it is. And maybe they'll get a chance to do it some other time. I've talked enough. You go.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. The thing I keep thinking about with the Bills is since 2020, I can make a legit argument they are the second best team in football consistently. They are the second best team. They're not the third, not the fourth, not the fifth. They're the second best team behind just the Kansas City Chiefs. So when you say that and you look at this Bills team and you look at who's coaching them and Sean McDermott, it's like, okay, you get rid of him, you can have any of the other coaches. Are they suddenly now the number one team? Like, I don't think that happens, because how come all of these other teams aren't succeeding? You look at Kyle Shanahan this year on the 49ers, who's always lauded as one of the best head coaches in the NFL. And sure, the 49ers dealt with some injuries. They won 6 games. Like, if Sean McDermott did that, his head would be on a pike, which luckily for the Bills, he's never going to allow that to happen in Buffalo, short of using rookie Josh Allen as his quarterback for an entire season, which he won't have to deal with for the remainder of his career. The frustrating part is it's just this Chiefs team. I don't know what it is, man. Like it's black magic. It's some sort of devil curse. There's something. I watched them play. I watched them play a lot this year, and I look at them. I'm like, they're not great, but they are great. I know they're great, but when I watch them play, I'm like, this isn't really good football. But they just win, and they win over and over and over again. The only team that legitimately beat them this year, the only team, is the Buffalo Bills, who beat them by 9 points, beat them by 2 scores. They're the only team that's done it. Can the Eagles do it in the Super Bowl? I think so, but I thought that the Bills could beat them here. I thought the Texans even had a chance, and oddly enough, the Texans almost could have beaten them. The Bills could have beaten them, but at the end of the day, the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones, all of those guys are 99 caliber guys, and they just find a way to win at the end of games, for better or worse. It might be the most frustrating thing I've dealt with in watching sports in my entire life. It's just so frustrating watching that team play, but I still think the Bills can get over that hump at some point, and I think they can do it with McDermott. As for the Super Bowl, though, I'm going to watch it. Like, I'm a football fan. I'm going to watch it. I'm not going to boycott the Super Bowl. I know a lot of people that are not watching the Super Bowl because they don't want to watch the Chiefs play the Eagles. Honestly, and I put this in the show notes, I don't know if I could think of a worse Super Bowl, but Chiefs and Eagles. I don't like the Eagles, to be completely honest. And I think if I look at the NFC, I'm like, I don't really know. Maybe the Cowboys would be worse, but not by much.
The Cowboys would be so much worse. Are you kidding me?
I don't know, man.
Come on.
It would be close, I think, between Cowboys and Eagles. But after those two, what other team in the NFC would, or like, if it was the 49ers, it'd be like, okay, like, run it back, sure.
Really? You'd want the 49ers again? You want the 49ers to lose again?
I I don't think I think I'd be like, okay, I can root for the four. I don't like the Eagles. I do not like the Eagles. So every Super Bowl I've ever watched in my life, I've been able to pick a team that I want to lose. And in the case of this game, it's going to be the Chiefs that I want to lose. The fun thing in the past is it's like, okay, well, I get to root for this other team. So when it was the 49ers Chiefs, I'd root for the 49ers. When it was the Eagles against the Patriots, well, I rooted for the Eagles because screw the Patriots. And also the Nick Foles thing was fun. That was cool and unique. This time though,
and the Saquon Barkley thing isn't fun. Zach Bond,
dude,
going from a nothing player in New Orleans and going back to New Orleans to play in the Super Bowl as a defensive player of the year candidate. That's not interesting. That's not cool.
I don't care about Zach Bond. He's meaningless to me. I don't care about him. Saquon, I love. Saquon is awesome. He seems like a good person. At least that's my perspective of him. He was awesome in college, one of the few college guys I really, really did like. And then on the Giants, just dealing with everything he dealt with there, and then finding his way to Philly and just succeeding to an extreme degree is really, really cool. But outside, you know what ruins it for me? Because I can love Saquon. I fucking hate Nick Sirianni so much. This is the thing. When people look at head coaches and look at like Sean McDermott and they want to drop the blame on him for every single thing that happens and then give Nick Sirianni is not causing these wins to happen. He's so I hate him. I hate him. And I hate that big fatso on the sideline that pretends he's a security guard, whatever the fuck he's doing. That whole team, that whole franchise.
I will not hear Big Dom slander. Will not hear Big Dom slander.
Dude, he's the worst. That whole franchise sucks. I hate that franchise. I'm sorry, because I know that you are an Eagles fan. I will be happy for you if they win. But in my mind, I will be pissed off. It sucks. The Super Bowl sucks. It really, really sucks.
So first of all, Big Dom, love Big Dom.
No.
Great guy. Great man. Listen. There are many people among Philadelphia sports fans who would also agree that they are not Nick Sirianni fans. Let's be very clear about that. There are not a lot of people who respect Nick Sirianni. I understand that there's not a lot he contributes, but there's also the fact that team last year that completely fell apart down the stretch could have easily just thrown Sirianni under the bus, and they didn't. There's something to him. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but there's something about him that players seem to at least respect.
The and maybe players love Robert Saleh.
Yeah, and
it doesn't make it. Ah, man.
Listen. If we're gonna sit here and say that culture is an important part of this, and being a coach and being a head coach is setting that culture and setting that tone, and for Sirianni, I think one of his best things is the fact that he's willing to just take on any and all criticism that comes his way, even including those that are more directed towards players, because he'll take that criticism on players very often.
I mean, to be completely honest, yeah. Have I watched a lot of Eagles press conferences? No, because I don't want to hear that bozo speak. But at the same time, I see him pointing at fans in the crowd and yelling at them when they win games.
Yeah,
I see him cowering like a little baby when they lose games. So
he's an idiot. What do you want? He's an honorable idiot.
He's not an honorable. He has no honor. He has no honor.
Listen, I understand that. I'm not going to sit here and say like Sirianni is going to be like my favorite reason why why I want the Eagles to win. I want the Eagles to win because it's the Eagles. And as much as I don't think Jalen Hurts is like a very good quarterback, I do think that he's also a great person and has done great things for this team and has battled through a lot just throughout his whole football career. Honestly, he's had a lot of ups and downs, so I appreciate that about him. And I love Saquon, and I love his journey to this position, and I appreciate that this team has been so well put together by Howie Roseman, and that he has taken his lumps and he's had his ups and downs, and he's put together good teams, and despite the fact that he can make mistakes, right? I mean, Bryce Huff was a big move that they made in the offseason, and he's contributed basically nothing to this team.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really mattered because other guys like Jalen Carter have turned into a Pro Bowl, all-pro type of player. Nolan Smith has turned into a really good pass rusher, already the most sacks in the postseason for an Eagles player ever. Like, there's great stuff about this team, and despite all of that, right? Like, this is a team that has always prioritized the one thing in football that I always love, and the thing that keeps football teams good, and that is offensive line play. They have consistently always put offensive line play above, honestly, just about anything else. And there's a lot of good things that the Eagles do that teams should be doing more to emulate, and they just don't. And that's why the Eagles are in the Super Bowl and other teams aren't.
Well, there's one more issue I have with rooting for the Eagles, and I put this in the show notes too. And it's, well, what? And I like Jalen Hurts. He
Sure.
seems like a good guy too. And what does this mean for his legacy? Now, what it means for his legacy is that he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback, at least from my perspective. What I do not like, yeah. What I do not like from a off-season discussion standpoint is if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, I can promise you there will be national talking heads constantly talking about Jalen Hurts is the second best quarterback in the NFL. He's the second best. He's ahead of Lamar Jackson. He's ahead of Joe Burrow. He's ahead of It's like, I don't want to deal with those narratives. I don't want to hear them. Well, Jalen Hurts did it. Jalen Hurts beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. It's like, it's a team sport. There's on no planet is Jalen Hurts better than those three dudes, even if he goes out and drops 5 touchdowns on Sunday against the Chiefs.
100% agreed. Also, I can't control what the national media says.
Well, I know that. Yeah,
that's just there's no point in trying to control the narrative of something that I don't have any control over. Because the other thing to consider here is if this had been Jane Daniels. If Jane Daniels had played in or won a Super Bowl, there would be people calling him the best quarterback in football after one season.
Well, yeah, that's crazy.
Which would have been ridiculous.
Yeah.
Now, maybe he would be because he was not described as a generational talent. I know how much you love that particular description when it comes to draft season. But regardless, you can nitpick about this sort of crap, right? It is what it is. The fact of the matter is the Eagles were, for most of the season, the best team in the NFC. And after that first month where they kind of struggled to figure out what they were on offense, they kind of struggled what to do on defense, it was pretty easily the best team in the NFC. And they proved that by beating teams like the Rams twice. They beat the Ravens in Baltimore in the regular season. They beat the Commanders 2 out of 3 times. It's not like they don't deserve to be here. It's not like this is a team that just sort of snuck their way in or whatever. It's a dominant team, and they have a legitimate chance to go in and do what only one other team has done this whole season and beat the actual legitimate Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, they 100% deserves to be there. And I legitimately think they have a path to beat the Chiefs just because I think they have the guys on defense. They have, like, Jalen Carter is going to be a problem. He's going to be an absolute problem for that Chiefs offensive line. And I think Jalen Carter is the difference, at least in my mind, why that defense can shut down that Chiefs offense is because he can destroy them. The Bills and Ed Oliver played a good game. I legitimately believe Ed Oliver played a good game against the Chiefs, but Jalen Carter is a different level of animal. Like, that dude can blow up an entire game. He's a game wrecker, something the Bills desperately need.
I wholeheartedly agree. And while we're on that particular discussion, let's pivot here. Pivot! That's a Friends reference. I know. I've never seen that show, but I know that reference. Let's pivot here to the big news of today, and that is that Myles Garrett, on his own, posted on social media that he is now looking for a trade. First of all, kudos to him for being the one who pushed it out there instead of having it leak through one of these insiders or something, or trying to have the team be like, oh, the Browns are looking to trade Myles Garrett, because they don't want to trade Myles Garrett. They would like to keep Myles Garrett. But once you, the player, put yourself out there and say, yeah, I don't want to be here anymore, you kind of lose a little bit of your leverage as a team that is currently holding on to him. And the Browns are kind of in a not great place to balk at too many offers. What is your read on this whole situation right now?
I think that it's crazy how bad that Deshaun Watson trade is going to go down in history as. And at the time, the off-field stuff was awful and insane, and he was a cancer that you need to stay away from to some extent. But the talent was still believed to be there because we watched this insane talent on the football field for the first few years of his career. That just, all the talent's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. He's a terrible quarterback. There's no way out of his contract. That team is just screwed for the next few seasons. There's nothing they can do. They're not going to be able to build some juggernaut to go compete against the Bengals and the Ravens. So they're just a lame duck team right now. And Myles Garrett's looking at it as like, I'm going to go down in history as maybe one of the greatest defensive players to ever play the sport. Like, that's the trajectory he's on right now. And he's saying to himself, I have no shot at a Super Bowl. I have zero shot at one in still the prime of his career, because he's still playing like he's in the prime of his career. He's like, I got to get out of here. And I fully understand his reasoning behind it. There's other people that ask out of contracts and want out of specific teams where I'm like, okay, come on, you little baby. Like a certain wide receiver possibly that played for the Bills at one point. But a player like Myles Garrett asking for this, he's asking for it because he wants to compete, and there's no competing in Cleveland.
So, yeah, you bring up how some other players have, tried to worm their way out of a team or whatever. I mean, if you look at Trey Hendrickson last year, which was another sort of odd situation of like, he wanted more money and then said he was going to hold out or something, and then he didn't. And then it was a very, very weird situation for Trey Hendrickson. Regardless, though, I want Myles Garrett. If it is possible for this Bills team to get Myles Garrett, go get him. Like we like you just talked about Jalen Carter being that type of difference maker for this team, for the Eagles. And that's the sort of impact, arguably more so, that Myles Garrett can bring to any team. I mean, this is the thing. We could talk about, oh, this team should do it, this team should do it, that team should do it. Every single team should be like blowing up Cleveland's phone lines right now. Yeah. Every single, and I understand that Cleveland's not going to like trade him within the division, because that would be literally insane. And like, they might just like burn down the stadium if that happened. Like, can you imagine if they traded Myles Garrett to the Steelers? Like, the Steelers would never do that. It would be such a weird thing for them to do anyway. But imagine that happening. That would be genuinely crazy. Outside of that, though, I think it's just free game. I think anyone who makes a good enough offer is going to do it. And let's be clear about something else here. Andrew Berry is a very analytically driven person. Now, there's kind of two ways you could take this, right? One way is saying that, okay, well, if he's analytically driven, he'll understand that there's a certain value to keeping someone like Myles Garrett that will be outweighed if we get the right price for him, and you don't want to necessarily be too emotionally attached to any particular player, even if they're a very good player, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's certain trade packages you could get where it's like, this will work. I don't like getting rid of a player like Myles Garrett, but I like what I'm getting in return for it. The other side of it, though, is, let's be honest, analytically driven people value pass rushers to I don't want to say unhealthy degree, but it's pretty darn close, where it's to the point where it's like, oh, well, who cares if he can play run defense? It's like, well, if you can't stop some teams from running the football, like the Eagles, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Ravens, i.e., the best teams in football, you're kind of in a really tough situation. So I do think that there is a dual part here. I really, really cannot imagine a situation where Myles Garrett is a Brown in 2025. I think he's at the bridge. He's doused it in some sort of lighter fluid, and he's ready to throw the torch on it and be done with that team. And I can't blame him because they have royally screwed themselves and their reputation and all of the goodwill that they've had in Cleveland for a very, very long time. And they're just still a bunch of losers, except now they're like expensive losers because you're paying Deshaun Watson a crap ton of money. And Myles Garrett for that matter, right? It's not like Myles Garrett is on his rookie deal or anything. That dude's getting paid a lot of money. And I don't know, man. This is a brutal situation if you're a Browns fan. It's a great situation for literally any other team because just like anything else in the offseason, there's hope. There's hope that Myles Garrett will be on your favorite team in 2025, and he'll be 30 years old when that happens. And arguably, so he's 29 right now. I assume he'll be 30.
He'll still be 29, but he'll turn 30 in the middle of the season, I think.
In the middle of the season, okay. Yeah. So arguably, you've got at least 3, if not closer to 4 or 5 years of high level Myles Garrett for you on your team. I don't know, man. This is I can't see a bad way. I mean, there would be bad ways to make this move, right? But it would be pretty hard. So let's address a comment here that I think is very, very important one to consider. Sweet Spike says, can the Bills keep Groot and afford Myles Garrett? The Twin Tower bookends, Groot and Garrett. I think no. One, because Myles Garrett's contract is pretty significant. He's gonna make a lot of money wherever he goes, and it's gonna be the same case for Greg Rousseau as well. And the Bills are gonna have to make that decision at some point, which is if Cleveland is interested in trading Myles Garrett to the Bills. I have to imagine that Cleveland is like, okay, well, we'll take Greg Rousseau if you want to include him in this particular trade package, and we'll sign him to a contract extension. Is that something that the Bills are willing to part with? Are the Bills even able to dangle that as an actual option to teams? It's a tricky situation right now for that specific reason.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they can afford both of them. I mean, I'm sure there's ways they could do it, but you're doing it to a degree where you're sacrificing so many other players. Like Terrell Bernard needs to be paid, Christian Benford needs to be paid, Khalil Shakir needs to be paid, James Cook needs to be paid. That doesn't mean you're going to pay all those guys, but you bring Myles Garrett in, like someone's got to go. If not one, 2 guys got to go eventually. In theory, could the Bills say, hey, we're going to run with Myles Garrett and Greg Rousseau in 2025 and let Greg Rousseau walk into free agency in 2026 and we'll take the 3rd round comp in 2027? You could do that. That's one path, and you get 1 year with pretty damn good defensive ends in Groot and Garrett, or you move Groot. Maybe you draft a defensive end early and hope they hit at a level that Groot has the past couple of seasons. I don't know, though, if Cleveland would necessarily want him, Greg Rousseau. And I say that just because he has to be paid. So if you're trading for him, you're going to have to pay him. And the Browns are in this situation where like they're just so screwed right now. What they really want to do is just bide their time until they get out from under Deshaun Watson, which is a couple of years away, and just bank salary, bank draft picks, try to build up for like 2027, 2028, because they're not going to be able to do anything until then. So do you trade for Groot, sign him to a $20+ million contract, and then he's probably in year, say, 3 of a 4-year contract before you even have the ability to think about competing? I don't know if he's a piece they would want, but that brings up a kind of a greater point to some extent. The Bills could make a trade for, say, Myles Garrett, and then maybe they could find a trade partner for Groot, and they could recoup a pick that they moved for Garrett. It's an interesting thing. I just don't think the Browns would particularly want Groot. There's a couple other players, like if the Bills wanted to move Christian Benford, maybe that's something the Browns would like more. But in reality, I don't know what player on the Bills really moves the needle in those trade discussions.
It's a lot of pieces, right? Like this is not a, oh well, we'll just trade for Myles Garrett and that'll be it, right? Like if you set off the Myles Garrett domino, that hits other dominoes, right? Like there are other things that you have to be willing to do and some sacrifices that you're gonna have to be willing to make. I don't know what they would be willing to sacrifice. I don't know how much of what they have right now they're willing to like move out or shift around or whatever. Maybe they're willing to do that because they think Myles Garrett is that guy, and I think that he is that guy. Yeah. It's tricky. It's not a simple situation. There are other places where it would be a lot easier, right? Washington comes to mind. It's a team that's won a bunch of games, just went to the NFC Championship game. You have a rookie quarterback or quarterback on a rookie contract, tons of money to spend. If Garrett wants just a little more sweetening to come to this team, and it's a defense that he would fit really well in because they would just move him around and they exploit his abilities really, really well. And, you know, it would be a great place for him to go. San Francisco would be another team that could take a big swing because they surprisingly have quite a bit of money that they could spend this year. They have like $40-something million in cap space right now. So they can afford to bring him on, pair him up with Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, can you imagine? That would be ridiculous. And the Niners, despite the Niners weirdly have felt like such an all-in sort of team. They've done some like real all-in sort of moves. They're still in a really good position right now for their offseason where they have money to spend. I think they have a good amount of draft picks as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And high ones too, because they stunk this year.
Right. That's the thing. So the Niners could be in play. Years ago, when Khalil Mack was in play and got traded from the Raiders to the Bears, the Niners were very much in play for that. There were rumors that the Niners had made like a better offer than the Bears did, but Mack ended up going to the Bears anyway. So the Niners are very willing to make those sort of swing for the fences moves. The Commanders are definitely going to be up there. It's tricky. It's there's a lot of teams that are going to be competing for Myles Garrett. It will be very, very interesting to see when it happens, if it's pre-draft, if it's post-draft, if it's during free agency, if it's even during training. I mean, this could drag on until training camp. Realistically speaking, this could drag all the way into August, and because that's what happened with Khalil Mack, right? Like this was something that dragged on and on for that entire summer until the Bears were finally able to pull the trigger at, a couple weeks before the season started. It's a difficult situation. It's not something when you get stuff like this, you want like a response to happen like now, right? Like, because you're just so eager for something to happen here. You have this piece of information, you're like, somebody do something with this. Somebody do something with this. But these sorts of things, it's going to drag, and it's going to drag for a long time. I think that I really think Cleveland is going to fight as hard as they can to try and keep him. I don't know how realistic that'll actually be. And I really think he won't be a Cleveland Brown next year. But you never know. And weird things happen in this league, man. Weird things happen.
It's going to... I'm with you. I don't think he's on the Browns next year. The pipe dream is he comes to Buffalo, but it's so much more difficult than just like throwing out, a projection, which like I had my projection on Twitter today, which um there's teams that are going to want him. Like he's that talented, and it's crazy because on Twitter today I had people telling me he's not a good football player. Like this dude is legitimately on a path to being discussed on like the Mount Rushmore of edge rushers. He's got versatility. You can move him on the defensive line and have him go up against different guys. He is a game wrecker, and I truly, truly believe like the one missing ingredient for the Bills these past few years is they just haven't had a game wrecker on defense. They've had really good players, awesome players like Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde and Trey White and Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard and Ed Oliver and what have you. But none of those guys reach that level of a Myles Garrett, of a TJ Watt, of these elite level players that you just have to focus on them as an offense. I cannot just leave him on an island to go one-on-one against some dude. It changes the whole complexity of the defense. And the Chiefs have one of those. Chris Jones is an absolute game wrecker. He will destroy an entire game by himself, no matter what you do to him. Myles Garrett's the same way. And I argue, and we don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole, the difference between the Bills and the Chiefs in this most recent playoff game was the gap between Ed Oliver and Chris Jones. And there's no reason I should expect Ed Oliver to be as good as Chris Jones, who's a future Hall of Famer. But that's the gap Buffalo needs to close. They need to find somebody, Myles Garrett being one of those somebodies, where they can put him up against Chris Jones and say, hey, we're even keeled here. And if that's the case, that game changes. And I think that's what Buffalo needs to get over this hump, because we've been trying the same thing now 4 separate times, and there's just hasn't been enough to slow down that offense. You need a player like Myles Garrett. And I think that Brandon Beane and I think that Sean McDermott are kind of feeling that now. And I think they understand that. This is a swing for the fences, though. And if it doesn't work, it kind of sets you back a little bit in the future, and it eats up a little bit more of Josh Allen's prime. So if you do this with full intent that 2025, 2026, it's all in on Super Bowl. So if they make this move, this would be a huge, huge, huge move, and I think it's worth it. They got to do it. If they can do it, they got to do it.
If they can do it and they don't do it, and we would never really have access to this sort of information or whatever, but if there was a deal in place and they just sort of said no, I would not feel good about that. And I don't think that's really the case. I think there will be one team that just is willing to give up more than anyone else, right? It could be the Cardinals, it could be the Chargers, it could be the Bears again, it could be the Lions. I mean, there's all of these teams are basically in play. Right? I would not genuinely rule out any team other than the 3 teams that are in the AFC North that aren't the Browns right now. I think every other team is in play. I'm sure every team has called and left a message to Andrew Berry and company to say, hey, let's talk. Let's get together at the combine and figure something out here. Man, I just... This is the other. Go ahead.
Garrett does not have a no trade clause, so he doesn't have a say.
There you go.
If they want to move him somewhere, they can send him to the Carolina Panthers if they want to.
He has the thing is they don't want to. That's the thing. But here's the other side of this, right? If the Bills did trade for Myles Garrett, and like you said, that sort of triggers this feeling of you're going all in for 2025 and 2026, probably 2027 as well. Yeah. Let's call it. Let's just throw that out there. Does that also set into effect another domino of the Bills will start spending in a way that they have not spent in previous years in free agency? Is that something that you would think they would do?
I don't, just because I think they know that they have talent on this roster in like I've said earlier, Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir, those guys. And I think they want to bring those guys back, some of those guys back. So if you go out and spend big money, unless you go full Saints and you just get silly and goofy with the cap and you're like, we're kicking everything down for 5 years.
Right.
Maybe they do that, but if you also, the other thing is if you look at this roster from head to toe, there's not many spots where they can find an upgrade, let's say in free agency. Like their offensive line is set. All these guys are coming back next year. Josh Allen's coming back. James Cook is coming back. Maybe you can go get a receiver, but what receiver are you going to go get that's suddenly going to change the course of this team that's a free agent right now? Like you're not moving on from your tight ends. You bring Myles Garrett in, you've improved your defensive line. Hopefully you can find a defensive tackle somewhere. Your linebackers are set. Your corners, you need a corner. So maybe you look for like there's just not many places I look where I'm like, oh, they can go spend and really improve their team. The difference is with this is like Myles Garrett's available. He's not a free agent, but he's saying, come get me. Like you gotta go get him. Yeah. It's this is a freakish talent to become quote unquote available.
It is, yeah. and that's a huge part of this. As to whether or not he has a no trade clause or not, it seems like there's a lot of competing information, and I don't know what or where I would actually be able to like look that up as some sort of official thing. So I don't think there's like a place where I would be able to look up an official contract or anything like that. But maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. At the end of the day, I don't really know how much that matters. Like when you are the guy who's going out there and saying, "Hey, I want to be traded. I would like to be traded." I don't think it really matters where you end up going. At least I don't think. To a point, right? I don't think that like. I mean, you said the Panthers. Honestly, I think he would probably be okay with going to the Panthers. I mean, Matt, you would be able to win enough games in that garbage division if he went there. Because that defense was bad last year. Adding Myles Garrett would be so much better for them, obviously. Just like he would improve any other team. But still, I don't know. I think that this is if he does want to go to a situation where he just wants to win right now or wants to have a legitimate shot at a Super Bowl, sure. That eliminates some teams like New England or Carolina or the Raiders or things like that. But even then, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting situation.
And he does have a little bit of leverage too, right? Like the presumption is if you trade for him, he's going to demand a contract extension or a price increase essentially. So you'd have to pay him. So he could essentially be like, if you are going to trade for me, I have to want to come there if I'm going to sign this extension, or if I'm going to force you to make me sign this extension. So there's some weird things there where he does have some leverage, but man, yeah, it's not imminent either. Like I think people are all excited about this today. This isn't happening for a long time, so it's definitely not happening this week. It's not even possible for it to happen this week. So
we're gonna get to a point with this particular storyline where it's gonna be like June, and we're gonna be so bored out of our minds, and we'll see some sort of headline on NFL Network in the middle of the day and be like, is this ever going to happen? Is it like, it's going to be like Favre Watch in like 2009 or something where it's like, is Favre going to retire? Here's our daily update on Brett Favre. And it's going to be that. It's just different.
And also
Myles
that makes a good point. That makes a really good point. Like, so what I was saying before, that the Browns are essentially trying to bide their time until they can get out from Deshaun Watson, which 2 years they have to wait. It almost behooves them to wait until after this draft to trade Myles Garrett for draft picks next year, not this year. Like, let's wait. Let's build up for the final year of Watson's contract instead of getting picks this year and eating up 2 years of their rookie deals underneath this piece of garbage quarterback we have. It almost makes sense to wait. Like, we don't want them now. We want them later.
You make a very good point here. Yeah, honestly, you're I think you're onto something there. I mean, and you know, as Spin says, they can trade for next year's draft picks this year. They can, but what teams are willing to offer those picks as opposed to this year's picks? Because there might be teams that are looking at this draft and saying, you know, there's some good edges, and it sounds like this is a good defensive line class, both on the interior and on the edge, which is also a good thing for the Bills because if they don't get Myles Garrett, they can pivot right back to the draft, and they've got 3 picks in the first 2 rounds, which is a great thing to have in a class like this when you need defensive linemen. But if all of these teams are only willing to offer picks for this year, or mostly just from this year, and the Browns are like, hey, we want picks for next year, not this year, teams are going to be, for whatever reason, some of them are going to be hesitant to do that. I'm not saying it's logical. I'm not saying it makes sense. Some teams are just going to not feel as comfortable with that. It is what it is. All right. Let's talk about other things, because it's been like 55 minutes and we've talked about like 3 things, basically. All right. Let's look at free agency right now. There's a lot of free agents, as there always is in any given season for the Bills. You've got this in the show notes, so I'm just going to read this top to bottom. You've got Amari Cooper at wide receiver. You've got Rasul Douglas at cornerback. Austin Johnson at defensive tackle. Mac Hollins at wide receiver. Dwayne Smoot. Is it Dwayne or Dwan? Dwayne?
I think it's Dwan. I'm honestly not sure.
I'm going to go with Dwan.
Okay.
That sounds better in my mind. Dwan Smoot at defensive end. Reggie Gilliam at fullback. Ty Johnson running back. Quentin Jefferson at defensive tackle. Jordan Phillips at defensive tackle. Reed Ferguson, the long snapper. Tommy Doyle, who I believe just announced that he's retiring.
Dew Champion said he would announce this week.
Okay. We'll call that a rumor right now until it happens, but it seems very likely that Tommy Doyle will retire. So that's not a concern for this right now. Jamar Hamlin at safety, Quentin Morris at tight end, and Alec Anderson at offensive line. So some of these guys, like Quentin Morris and Alec Anderson, are restricted or exclusive rights free agents, which makes it much more likely that they'll return to the Bills.
Yeah.
Both Morris and Anderson, bring them back. They're not going to cost that much. That's not a huge concern for me. I'm perfectly fine with Quentin Morris being the third tight end, because he can block decently well, and weirdly comes up with some crazy catches for like he has like 4 catches every year, and 3 of them are some of the most insane plays you'll ever see all season. It's kind of weird, but I'm all for it. And Alec Anderson, I mean, my God, if there's a like unheralded player just among the general football cognoscenti for the Buffalo Bills, it's Alec Anderson. And like, there's a lot of people that know about Alec Anderson because the Bills play so much 6 offensive linemen, and it's like, oh, well, who is this 6 guy? And it's like, oh, it's Alec Anderson. Cool. But then you watch him and you watch how they use him, and it's like, this dude's like really important to this offense and how it functioned last year. It would be kind of crazy to not. It would be ridiculous to not bring Alec Anderson back, even if he was just like a regular unrestricted free agent. But he is an exclusive rights free agent, which is different.
They just have to offer him vetmin, and he has to stay.
Oh,
so he's coming back. Yeah.
So
he's essentially on the roster. Yeah, he's on the roster.
We'll call that on the roster. We're not gonna worry about that. And we'll essentially call Quentin Morris back, because they just have to put like a what is it?
They can tender him. I don't even honestly know if they'll tender him though. Like they might just be like, "You want to come back?" And he'll come back.
He'll probably come back, unless some team is gonna give him like a 2-year deal with like more money than what they're expecting or something, but I can't imagine who would do that. So let's get to some of the real meat. Who would you say are like, give me one easy decision that you would make here based on the unrestricted free agents that are here right now?
I mean, I'm gonna kind of cheat a little bit here, but Reed Ferguson, bring him back.
Okay, sure. I mean, you went with like the easy answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I can't disagree with that. The long snapping situation has been good since he's been here, and why rock the boat right now?
And longest tenured player.
Yeah, sure, that matters too, I guess. Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. would be honestly a little upset if they did not find a way to bring back Matt Collins at this point. And I don't know how much money he would get in the open market. And he's been on a number of teams, and he's, been a sort of depth player for the Eagles who would, play on special teams and not contribute a ton to the offense. He gained some weight and went to tight end for a couple of different teams. He's been with the Raiders. He's been with Miami. He's now in Buffalo. I think he was in Atlanta last year, if I remembering correctly. He's been around the league. And the Bills, kind of by a strong degree, have given him the most opportunities on offense and found a way to legitimately utilize him, right? He had an actual role on this offense. And more than that, I mean, we've discussed this on this show, right? Every team has a goblin. And Matt Collins is the Bills' goblin who just has this attitude, who has this demeanor of willingness to just get in people's faces for no reason, right? For no reason other than just he knows getting into people's heads is an easy thing to do that can give you an advantage, right? And not only that, he knows he gamifies his position, right? He's able to draw penalties and he goes out of his way to draw penalties at times. He can also make catches, has pretty consistent hands, all things considered, for a fourth type of receiver, right? Having Matt Collins as your depth guy and one of your special teams aces, I'm 100% for that. I think unless some other team is giving him a ton of money somewhere else, relatively speaking, for what he is, I think that this is a pretty easy move to make.
Yeah, and I will add too, and this was really important in Week 18, and it often goes overlooked by I think a lot of fans and a lot of analysts. The Bills went out of their way to make sure that Matt Collins hit 2 incentives, essentially netting him an extra $175,000 this year, something they didn't have to do. They literally could have just been like, we're not going to let you hit those incentives. Look at Jerry Jones, for instance, with Cooper Rush. But they did. And I think that kind of plays into your mentality as a player. Matt Collins now hitting the open market probably wants to come back to Buffalo. I don't see why he wouldn't want to, knowing that they're going to look out for him. And it also has been essentially his best stop. He had one big year with the Raiders in 2022. He had 690 yards, but I think that's more of an anomaly than anything else in his career. Other than that, this was his most receiving yards. This was his most receiving touchdowns. Come back to Buffalo, sign him to, I don't know, a 2-year contract, because at a minimum, you get the special teams out of him. And he's a really, really good blocking wide receiver. I'd love if the Bills brought back Matt
Collins. Big surprise here. Max Shoeshiner says the Bills need his moxie. Moxie is a great term for Matt Collins and what he brings. Spin also agrees he is the ultimate goblin. Mac Attack says Tank Ninja 1. Chudley 716 says give Collins a 2-year deal. I'm all for it, man. I like Matt Collins quite a bit. I'm all for it. Let's group the 3 defensive tackles together here. Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson, and Austin Johnson. I am totally fine with letting 2 of these guys go. And I am even more okay with never seeing Jordan Phillips in my life ever again. I cannot with that dude anymore. He brings he's a liability in terms of run defense. Far and away, liability in run defense. Just a huge problem in run defense. Cannot bring it. On top of that, he's just the potential for him to get some random personal foul or unsportsmanlike conduct is way too high for someone who brings as little as he does to any given game. It drives me crazy. I do not want to see Jordan Phillips on this team ever again. I understand he had made a big play in that AFC Championship game. All for that. No, not doing it. No. Not doing it again. RJ says Jordan Phillips was the second best defensive tackle in the playoffs. No, we're not doing this. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's the case. That's not what happened. That's not reality. Just because he had a sack against the Chiefs does not mean that he was the second best defensive tackle in the playoffs for the Bills. Not buying it. Not what happened in reality. Not at all what happened. We're not doing this. We're not doing this, Jordan Phillips again. Get him off this team. Get him out of the state of New York. Get him away, as far away from this team as possible. I can't do this with Jordan Phillips anymore. I'm over it.
You have significantly stronger opinions about Jordan Phillips than I do. I will say I would be fully comfortable with him being the Bills' AJ Klein next season. Don't roster him. You don't need to. In case there's some absolute emergency, at least you know there's a body that you can put on the field. I know that it's not great all the time.
Guess what? That's what he was this year, and it still sucked.
In all reality, Austin Johnson, Quentin Jefferson, Jordan Phillips, I'm perfectly fine if all three are gone. I don't need any of them because this was the entire season. The entire season, we were like, the interior defensive line is bad. Like, it needs to get better. And they just couldn't. They need to get guys there. And Myles Garrett's not a defensive tackle, but if you get Myles Garrett, it improves your defensive tackles because the rest of the team has to look at them. Yes. But yeah, no, let these three walk. I'm fine with it.
I'm totally fine with all three of these guys not being on this team. Let's see. Let's talk about Dawuane Smoot, because he missed a number of games last year due to an injury. He was on IR. I feel like when he did play, though, that you could feel when he played. One, I feel like he brings a really great physicality that this defensive line just straight up needs, right? Like this is a defensive line that needs some attitude in a good way, not in a Jordan Phillips sort of way. But he brings a real great physicality and an energy that this defensive line just doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of. And I think that his versatility, being somebody that can play inside in certain situations, also helps with that. He's a really good run defender. And I depending on what other team is willing to compete for his services, I'm all for bringing back Dawuane Smoot if that is in the cards.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. He had 5. I looked up the stats. I thought that this made sense in my head. He had 5 tackles for loss this season in 322 snaps. Granted, he played on the edge more than this next person. Ed Oliver had 5 tackles for a loss, and he played 603 snaps. So Dawuane Smoot kind of made the best of his chances. Granted, again, different positions. It's easier to do that up from the outside than the inside. But Smoot was a good part of this Bills team. And like you said, it felt different every time he played.
Yeah, I like I said, there's just a certain physicality that he brings that I appreciate. I'm all for bringing someone like that back. On that same note, Ty Johnson, Reggie Gilliam, I think I would be pretty shocked if they did not bring back Ty Johnson. And we've talked about this, right? Like, Ty Johnson has been one of the best, not one of the best. He is just the best third string running back that any team could possibly ask for, right? Like, his ability to just do it all, right? Like, he can run inside. He has just enough speed to make it work outside. He can catch the ball really well. And he's one of their best pass protecting backs, if not their best pass protecting running back. How much money is that worth, as Spin 0481 asks here? I don't know. And maybe the Bills aren't quite so willing to give him that sort of money, even though they like him a lot. Maybe they're willing to give Ty Johnson money and maybe not pay James Cook when that contract comes around, when that decision comes around, because they have Ty Johnson and Ray Davis, and maybe they feel really good about Ray Davis. I don't know. It's a difficult question. I think that I would be much more willing to give Ty Johnson money regardless of what happens or what they decide to do with James Cook. And again, it would be pretty shocking to me to move on from Ty Johnson after the season that he's had with this team and what all he's contributed to this team. It's not just on offense. He is also a special teams player as well. We know how much this team values special teams players, even if they don't value good special teams coaches. I think that this will be a really easy signing, in my opinion, for the Bills.
Yeah, I mean he's going to be 28 this year, so he's kind of getting up towards that number that running backs kind of tail off. And the only reason I bring that up isn't because I think Ty Johnson's about to tail off. I think that other teams outside of Buffalo are going to look at him and be like, he's an RB3, like he's kind of getting older. He hasn't really produced at a super high level. Like he's not a player that will change our franchise per se. I think he means more to Buffalo than he means to anyone else because they know what he can do. He fits this offense well. He's kind of that backup plan. And that blocking is so underrated. Being able to put him back there and say, hey, we know that Ty Johnson's going to catch that one runner that comes through and give Josh Allen that extra second. A team like the Texans could probably use somebody like that, for instance.
Man.
I would expect the Bills to try to get Ty Johnson back. $3 to $4 million, no. I don't think they're going to offer him that. But maybe they give him a little pay bump. Maybe he gets closer to $2 million. That's just my personal opinion, right? This season he made like 1.2. I don't think that they're going to offer him a ton more than that, though.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And as Ralph Wilson Sr. from the grave says, tons of tabs, I assume running backs, in this draft. Could see Cook moving on for bigger money that's too rich for a 2-down back. And I mean, almost every year that Bean has been the general manager of this team, he has taken a running back in a draft, right? I mean, he's drafted Devin Singletary and Zach Moss and James Cook and Ray Davis. Like, that's not every year, obviously, but it's a lot of years where he's taken a running back. And he didn't want to pay Devin Singletary, and I don't necessarily blame him for that. I think that was the right move to make. He didn't pay Zach Moss. In fact, he traded him before he even had a chance to do that. And again, that has kind of been the right move. Like, it's tricky because I think James Cook is pretty easily better than either of those two ever showed, right? Like, James Cook is a legitimate top 5 running back in this league right now. And he will command a certain amount of money that maybe the Bills just aren't willing to pay. Maybe their philosophy really is just, we're not going to give a running back a second contract. It is what it is. It's going to suck when he goes, but I think James Cook is giving the Bills pause on what their typical philosophy is at running back and what they do in terms of a second contract.
It's such an interesting, like, I don't want to pay a running back as long as Josh Allen's my quarterback. That being said, James Cook was really, really good this year. And he took another step this season. Last year he was good and he took another step forward. And you said top 5, and I'm trying to think of like where he actually fits in the hierarchy. The top 3 in my mind are Saquon, Derrick Henry, and Jahmyr Gibbs, in whatever the hell order you want to throw them in. Then, like, so where does James Cook fit? It is what I'm kind of getting at here. Like, you got Bijan Robinson, you got Jonathan Taylor, you got Kyron Williams. Yeah. Like, is he? Is he the top of that tier, or is he the bottom of that tier? Is he in that tier? Like, is he in that second tier running backs?
I think so. I think pretty easily he's in that second tier of running backs because I don't think he's not Derrick Henry or Saquon, right? And I do think that Jahmyr Gibbs brings an extra dimension just because Jahmyr Gibbs is like kind of otherworldly fast. Yeah, especially like he gained weight from last year to this year and still has just legit breakaway speed, which is insane to think about. But we're not here to talk about that. Bijan Robinson has had 2 really, really great seasons as a running back, and nobody has cared because he's been on the friggin' Falcons. and unfortunately, he's the one who should be demanding a trade right now. honestly. Jonathan Taylor, great player. Health concerns are a very real thing for him, which have not been a very real thing for James Cook for like most of his career with the Bills so far.
Yeah.
And he is somebody who did not have like a ton of run when he was in college at Georgia either, right? Like he was part of a committee at Georgia because Georgia always has a billion friggin' running backs. But like the most carries he had in a single season at Georgia was 113 in his final season. It's nothing. It's literally nothing. I mean, and before that he had 41, 31, and 45. It's not like this is somebody who got worn out in college and is like on pace to have a similar sort of like burnout to the average running back. Could there be longevity with James Cook that there haven't been with other running backs? Maybe. That would be certainly defying certain data points and trends that we've seen in a majority of other running backs. Derrick Henry notwithstanding, because he's clearly sculpted by the gods. Yeah. But regardless, it's worth considering, and it's not. We're in a place with James Cook that I did not think we would be in, right? Where we're actually having to think about, should this guy be a part of this team for the future? I'm not fully decided one way or the other, but that's also not a discussion for right now either. We unfortunately kind of got fishtailed into this with the Ty Johnson discussion, who I think the Bills should bring back. I think the Bills should bring back Ty Johnson. So we'll leave it at that. Reggie Gilliam, again, as long as another team is not like giving him a bunch of money and competing for that, Reggie Gilliam is another person that I really like. He brings a ton of physicality on offense that, unlike on defense, when talking about DeJuan Smoot, right, there are other players on offense, especially on that offensive line now, maybe between Brian Dawkins. God, forgive me. I'm in Philly mode. Between Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown being your offensive tackles and Josh Allen being your quarterback, it's a ton of physicality that gets brought to this offense. Reggie Gilliam is just another aspect to that, and I'd like to keep that if it's possible.
Yeah, that and the special teams. I don't see anyone really offering him a contract outside of Buffalo. I would presume he'll be back.
I would think so too. Damar Hamlin. First of all, let's get this out of the way, right? I think Damar Hamlin played well this year. I think that he was a pretty solid presence for this team in the playoffs. I think you saw that as well. Where I just keep going back to that play he made against Derrick Henry, where had he not made that ankle tackle, Derrick Henry is still running. And I think that he's not a perfect player. He's not the best safety in the world. No one is ever going to call him that, but he'll definitely get some looks. I think that a team like Pittsburgh is probably going to take a look at him. It's where he went to school. He grew up around that area. I have to imagine Mike Tomlin would just love to have someone like Damar Hamlin on his team, especially to go with somebody like Minkah Fitzpatrick, who, while not playing necessarily at like an all-pro level anymore, is still a very, very good safety. And pairing someone like Damar Hamlin with him, it makes sense. If the price is right, I would be fine with having Damar Hamlin back, but I don't want him in a starting role again, because I think this needs to be Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop moving forward, because that's why you drafted Cole Bishop.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like, I would take Damar Hamlin back on this roster. I know that there's some Bills fans that say absolutely not, which is just crazy to me, because like I say this with confidence. He's a top 64 safety in the NFL, meaning he's a starting caliber safety. Like, he can go somewhere and start and give you decent play. And I think we saw that this year. I think he actually played pretty well in the playoffs. But I think that the Bills can improve at this position, and they have the player on the roster to do it, and that's Cole Bishop. So bring Damar Hamlin back if he wants to come back on the kind of the cheap. sit him behind as your kind of backup in case break glass of emergency, because Taylor Rapp's bound to hurt himself or hurt somebody. So you need somebody behind them. But I really like your take that it's Pittsburgh. Like that just feels like what's going to happen, which good for DeMar Hamlin. One of the coolest sports stories of my lifetime. So wish him the best, even if it's not in Buffalo.
Yeah, and I feel like there are some people who have taken just his whole story for granted now. Like,
yeah,
I don't ever want to take for granted the fact that that guy was a starting safety for this team after needing to be resuscitated on a football field. The mental toughness it takes to even go back out there is one thing. To actually go out there and be an important part of why you were a 13-win team, won your division for a 5th straight time, went to the AFC Championship game. It's just cool, man. That's why sports are great.
Tackled tackled Derrick Henry in the open field. Like the dude fears nothing. That is insane. He went through what he went through and tackled that behemoth. It was really, really cool.
All right. The two big names, though. Amari Cooper at wide receiver and Rasul Douglas at cornerback. Now, I don't think Rasul Douglas had a bad season. I think that there were some people, one person I'm thinking of in particular, who gets a little emotional sometimes, who tried to call Rasul Douglas a liability. I think that's too far. Now, did he have the sort of season that he did in 2023? No, he did not, which is unfortunate. How much money is Rasul Douglas going to get? Because I feel like it's going to be more than the Bills are probably willing to give Rasul Douglas at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what the number would be, but like I don't even know. In my head, I'm like, if you said 10 million, I'm not paying 10 million.
I'm not giving 10 million a year to Rasul Douglas at this point. I like Rasul Douglas. I would be fine to have him back if the price was right. Paying that much money for him? Probably not. And part of that really goes back to the fact that I believe in this Bills team to find defensive backs and coach them up and make it work with whoever they feel will work in that spot. For example, DJ Reed is set to be a free agent in this offseason. And I'm gonna take a wild stab and say DJ Reed is probably not going back to the Jets. Now they did hire Aaron Glenn, and Aaron Glenn does have his way with players. And I think there's a slight chance that he feels he can return back to the Jets. But he was one of those players, like near the end of the season, who was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to be here next year. I'm just going to go to free agency." Like openly, just telling people, "Yeah, I'm going to go to free agency." Which is a crazy thing to do, but not at all surprising either, given the state of the Jets. I would really like DJ Reed. I think he is a very, very good player. I think he would be really fun to have on this team. And he's 29 years old, so you could get a couple of seasons out of him before the tires really fall off of him. And I think he's just a really technically sound player, so I'd be into that. As a replacement. And if that's not the case, if he gets more money than maybe the Bills are willing to give to that type of player, there's other players in free agency. There's other guys. I think that whoever the Bills end up getting to replace Rasul Douglas, if Rasul Douglas does in fact walk, I think they'll be fine there.
So I just pulled up like the cap hits for next season, let's say. And the line of demarcation between like the elite and the regular almost is Kendall Fuller, who got who's getting 8.3 this year. Like that's his cap hit in 2025. And so I'm like, is that where Rasul Douglas is? Like Dane Jackson next season ranks 29th and he's at 5.9 million.
Sure. That's true. Hey, bring Dane Jackson back.
I'd take that.
Yeah, I don't. Again, my feelings towards whether or not Rasul Douglas stays or goes, he's really just dependent on how much money they're going to give him. I think Rasul Douglas is a good fit for this defense. I like him. I like the energy that he brings, like the leadership that he brings. Is it enough to necessarily like warrant giving him a lot of money? Probably not. And I think the Bills, in general, have been very judicious when it comes to how much they're willing to give players like this, and especially a defensive back. I think they're well aware that they will find a player who will fit what they want to do, kind of at any price point, right? Like they'll find someone.
Yeah, they don't need. I don't think they need Rasul Douglas. I'd actually prefer they draft somebody.
Yeah, I think
like
that's fair.
Day 2 or day 3. Let Sean McDermott work his magic,
as he often does. Amari Cooper, mid-season acquisition, third round pick given up to the Cleveland Browns. At the time, it felt like the right decision. And I would still argue that it was the right decision. It was a good process. And I think that even though he didn't necessarily have a bunch of stats for this team, I think that just being able to move certain guys into their more proper positions on offense was beneficial in and of itself. Regardless of whether or not he had the stats to kind of justify the move, the offense was better after Amari Cooper got there. And I think that just his abilities and his presence was enough to kind of get this team, in terms of its passing offense, back to where it needed to be. That all being said, I'm okay with letting Amari Cooper walk, kind of just period. I feel like at this point he's lost enough speed where I'm not super comfortable giving him that type of money. And it sucks that that's the case, but you got to be able to live with the fact that there are other receivers that you can go out there and get. You can hope, although as we've said before, hope is not a plan. Right? Like you can hope that Dalton Kincaid can actually become a worthwhile receiver, and we'll definitely talk about Dalton Kincaid during the offseason. We guarantee that. But I don't know exactly what Amari Cooper is going to bring to this team in 2025.
It's funny because you brought up the process, right? Like if you go back to the midseason trades, there was 4 wide receivers that were traded. It was Devontae Adams, Deontay Johnson, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins. I would argue that DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Cooper were the 2 most impactful. And I think I could argue that they both are basically the same in their level of impact, where Devontae Adams, like, cool, the Jets sucked before they got him. They sucked after they got him. And then Deontay Johnson, whatever the hell happened to him, I don't even know.
He's also a free agent and one that I'm putting a do not touch tag on.
Dude. That guy, there's something going on there.
Something's up with him.
But so I think the Bills, I think it was the right move to make then. I'm fine with giving up the third because I don't think the Bills make the AFC Championship if Amari Cooper wasn't on the team. I don't really see the value in him this season, though, which is crazy to think. But I also don't know who's going to pay him or what they're going to pay him. Like, if you get him really, really cheap, bring him back. But I don't think I'm offering him $7 million. I don't think I'm touching that number because he, like you said, he did lose a step. Or so it seems.
It's unfortunate because I really liked him as a player. I really liked the fit with this team. I liked the idea behind it, and that's fine. Overall, it is what it is with him, and I wish that he didn't look quite so slow, that he didn't look quite like he was showing his age, but he did. And you gotta kind of live with that reality, and I'm okay with not bringing him back and finding someone else, and maybe not even in that like in that mold. I mean, there's going to be guys like I don't know, Darius Slayton for the Giants is interesting to me. Brandon Cooks is interesting to me. If you really wanted to get funky, we could get like a Marquise Brown, right? Like, I don't know, man. There's other options in free agency. There's not like a top tier sort of option that the Bills would be able to afford. I mean, I don't think a Stephon Diggs reunion is on the table for the Bills. And I think T. Higgins is going to have like a lot of teams that are going to be pushing his overall price tag up. And outside of that, it's kind of like, do you want a 33-year-old Keenan Allen? I don't. Do you want DeAndre Hopkins at 33 years old? Probably not, because at that point, why not just keep Amari Cooper?
This might be a hot take. I don't want the Bills signing a wide receiver as a free agent, like outside of Matt Collins. Like, give me back Matt Collins. I don't need another dude. Like, I want them to draft a wide receiver this year.
So I agree with you in theory. I agree with you in a vacuum, right? This wide receiver class is not great. Like it's got some good players, particularly at the top, at least from what I've heard. But this is more of the defensive line is a really good class. The running backs are a really good group. The tight ends are a really good group. Wide receivers, unlike the last couple of years, it's not as strong. There's still some guys that are worth the pick, but they're probably going to be well gone by the time the Bills pick, especially in the first round. And they need a high level talent, in my opinion, to get to that next point, right? And they need Keon Coleman to take that next step forward and that sort of thing. So I don't know how likely it is that they're going to look at the first round or first two rounds and be like, we're for sure targeting a wide receiver. Oh. Maybe they are. I don't know. And then that could change. I have not necessarily done like a ton of research into this. I'm just kind of going off of what I've heard, what I've seen. It just sort of seems like there's a couple of guys at the top, and it just sort of continues to fade pretty decently as it goes on.
To be perfectly, like, just so I make this clear, like, I want a wide receiver drafted. The first, if the Bills aren't trading for Myles Garrett, which I don't honestly think they're going to do,
right?
It's you're drafting defense. Like, the Bills need to throw every dart you can at the dartboard and hope that you luck into a game wrecker. Like, I don't care if you have to draft only defensive players this year. You got to find that dude, because at the end of the day, I think that Josh Allen and James Cook essentially can find a way to score points. I need the defense to be better, and I need one superstar on that defense.
I think that's fair. I think that's totally fair. So at the end of the day, we're feeling good about Alec Anderson, Reed Ferguson, Matt Collins all coming back as free agents or restricted guys. Quentin Morris as well. Reggie Gilliam and Dwan Smoot and DeMar Hamlin kind of fit in the category of, hey, as long as nobody else is offering them more than what we're willing to, like, kind of vet minimum plus whatever that is, then we'll bring them back. Everyone else, your Austin Johnsons, your Quentin Jefferson, Jordan Phillips types, Amari Cooper, we're kind of willing to just say, let's find something else here.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Ryan Tangent says the defense seemed like poop this year, even though they were 11th in points allowed. Well, points are kind of the important part of playing defense. So all you need to do is follow Aaron Quinn for like a week, if that long, on Twitter, especially during the season. And he will preach to you the gospel and the idea of yards are a junk stat and nobody should be using total yards as like a real indicator of a team that is good or not, especially on defense. But that's a whole offseason we can do to discuss that if we really want to. Yeah, all right. In terms of players on this team that are cut candidates, you have written down here Von Miller, Daquan Jones, A.J. Epinesa, Tyler Bass, and Kyer Elam. I feel good. I don't feel good. I don't want to say I feel good about doing it, but I'm fine with letting Daquan Jones go. I think the signing him last year was kind of the right move because when he was here and when he was healthy, he was very, very good and very, very disruptive. And when you looked statistically at other defensive tackles that were his size and played his sort of role, it was like, okay, there's a pretty like steady but slow drop off as they age. It's not like super crazy, like some huge drop. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened with Daquan Jones. He completely fell off. The power and the movement just wasn't there. And it's unfortunate because he was really, really good when he was healthy. It's just that age has caught up to him and you're going to have to just move on from that. Any disagreement on that?
No, I need the defensive interior to be better, and he's part of the problem.
Yeah. AJ Epinesa, I feel fine with him with the money that he's being paid right now. It's not like they're paying him a crazy amount of money. I think that he could be better. Overall, I think that he is doing a perfectly reasonable job, and he's not breaking the bank with what he's being made or what he's making. His cap number for 2025 is $7.5 million rounded up. That's fine. I'm okay with that. And it'll be the second year of his 2-year contract. So if it doesn't work out, he's gone next year, and so be it. It is what it is. I like having him as a rotational player. I think that there are times in certain games where he really comes up big. I think he was another guy in that Ravens game that played really, really well. So I'm okay with AJ Epinesa being here.
Yeah, the past 3 seasons, 6.5 sacks, 6.5 sacks, 6 sacks. So you're going to get 6 sacks from him, which is a solid number for a rotational piece. So
it's totally fine. Yeah, it's totally fine. Kyer Elam. Do whatever you want with him as long as he's not on this team anymore. I'm kind of like, here's the thing. Get rid of Jordan Phillips. I don't want Jordan Phillips anywhere near this team. Kyer Elam, realistically, could he go to another team and find some sort of success? Maybe. Mm-hmm. Maybe. He's got talent. He's got ability. It's just they took a swing on a player that doesn't necessarily fit their mold after the Chiefs traded up and got the player that they wanted in Trent McDuffie. And it sucks, but that's what happened. And it didn't work out. They took a swing and it didn't work out. Now they got to eat that. They got to own that mistake and move on.
Yeah. He's just not good enough for the Bills. Like you said, he could go somewhere else and somebody that plays a different style of defense, and maybe he goes to a team like Dallas where he can jump routes and give up big plays, and that's fine. It's not working in Buffalo, and I think the experiment's over. I think that this final game against the Chiefs, which again, it's against the Chiefs. It's not easy to play well against the Chiefs, but Elam was just straight up bad, man. The drop off from Christian Benford to him is massive. And I think we kind of, for the first time, truly saw how big of a drop it was. You need even a better backup than Kyer Elam at this point.
I agree. Like there are other guys, especially when you look at like just free agency in particular, and Elam could be somebody that they just replace with a late draft pick, like they've done many, many times before with other players, right? And especially at that position. But there are certainly guys that I think would not be a ton of money that you could bring back or just bring in and it would be fine. You can't bring this dude back. You just can't. It just doesn't make sense. It didn't work, and you gotta own that. You gotta wear it, and it sucks, but you gotta move on from him at this point. It's just not working, and you gotta let him get a chance with another team, right? I think that's the best thing you can do. All right, so we're good with moving on from Daquan. We're good with moving on from Kyrie Elam. We're good with keeping AJ Epinesa. Tyler Bass. Where are we at? What are your feelings of Tyler Bass right now, Uber? Where are you at with Tyler Bass right now?
So, wax a little bit poetic here. I think the kid's swagger is back. I think he's back.
You think it's back?
3 playoff games, the most pressure you could possibly have. He drilled all 13 of his kicks. He drilled multiple from 50 plus. Like he's gonna miss an extra point every once in a while. He's gonna miss a gimme field goal every once in a while. But I think he might be back. I'm fine. I'm content with rolling with Tyler Bass next year as our kicker. Like he could have cost us a game against the Chiefs, the Ravens, or not really against the Broncos, but against the Chiefs or the Ravens. He didn't. He's part of the reason we were in those games. So I'm all in on Tyler Bass coming back to Buffalo next season.
I agree. Really, ever since that Miami kick, you could see that change, right? And I think that's a very, very good thing. I don't necessarily, kicker money is always annoying, right? Because it's like, really, they're paying that much money for a kicker, really? But it is what it is. And if you feel like you have a kicker, you got to pay the money for it. And the other thing is, free agent kickers are free agent kickers for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the option here? You want a 41-year-old Matt Prater or Nick Folk in here? Is that what we're really doing? Joey Sly, Austin Seibert? Like, there's nobody that's going to give you what you want as a kicker if you get rid of Tyler Bass. Like you said, he's going to miss some stupid easy kick at some point. He's going to miss an extra point. I get it. It's annoying. I wish it didn't happen. So be it. But for what he was, particularly in the playoffs, I think that I got to a point with Tyler Bass where I felt like, okay, he'll make this kick. Whatever that situation was, right? Like, I had not felt that way for a while, and to kind of feel that way again, I was like, okay, we're back here. I think that's fine. Ralph Wilson Sr. puts it in a great way. Bass-o-matic-ish. Yep. I can't think of a better way of saying that, honestly.
He finished the season making 85.7% of his field goals. Brandon Aubrey made 85.1% of his field goals. Granted, a little different because Aubrey kicks from 60 plus most of the time. That being said, bring Tyler Bass back. I'm good with it.
I'm totally fine with keeping Bass. I think the team as a whole, I think McDermott and Bean really like Tyler Bass, and I think it's fine. I think it's totally fine. And now we've reached the big question. What do you do with Von Miller? At the moment, because of the way that the Bills restructured his contract last year, where essentially, like, he did what basically nobody else ever does, right? Like, when people say, or more specifically, when agents or insiders try to frame it as, oh, well, so-and-so took a pay cut to make this team better. It's like, they just pushed money down the road so that they could get more space this year. It's not really what happened with Von Miller. Von Miller essentially waived certain guarantees and turned those into incentives, which allowed the Bills more flexibility, not just for 2024, but also in 2025. And I think that that's very admirable of him. I'm glad that he did it. And at this point, I'm okay with moving on from Von Miller.
Thank you. I was hoping you were going that direction. Yeah, it's time. Von Miller doesn't need to be a part of this team anymore. There was flashes this season too. Like he flashed a couple times, but for the money we can save and for the money that he costs, no, I don't need unless Brandon Beane can somehow go to Von Miller and be like, you want to play for free essentially and get rid of all that extra money? And Von's like, yeah, sure, I'll stay in Buffalo for another year. I'll just eat the extra. Then yeah, but other than that, cut him.
Yeah. I think that Von Miller actually was pretty decent for most of the season. Certainly better than what he was when he tried to come back in 2023, right? He was just non-existent in 2023. He had good pressures, but unfortunately, like they didn't bring him here to be Jerry Hughes, essentially, right? They didn't bring him in to be a late career Jerry Hughes. They brought him in to be a finisher and a closer, and his first year, that's exactly what he was. Like, there's been some annoying people online who have tried to do this revisionist history bullshit with Von Miller and saying, "Oh, that was a swing that didn't work. It didn't make sense." Blah blah blah. It's like, okay, everyone loved the fact that the Bills signed Von Miller. Mm-hmm. There were some people who were hesitant about like the length and the money that he was getting, but that was going to happen wherever he went, right? That's the facts. And in that first year, he was very, very, very good. He was, in essence, the player that we're looking for right now, right? Yeah. That high-level pass rusher that can finish off a game and win one-on-ones consistently. In that regular season game against the Chiefs, he absolutely throttled that Chiefs team. He was so freaking good against that Chiefs team in that game. Stupid good. And it just is so unfortunate that he was a victim of the turf monster, essentially. And specifically the Detroit turf monster.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate because he was having a great year and it killed his 2023. And it sucks that we're in a position that the Bills have to essentially call a good decision a bad decision. And it is what it is. And you gotta take it and move on and wish him the best. And yeah, it just sucks. It sucks because this was a great move that they made. It made sense at the time. And when you look back in hindsight, it still makes sense. Mm-hmm. Right? Like he was a very good player for this team. It just was bad luck. And it sucks to say that, but that's kind of what it was.
Yeah, I this kind of goes full circle, but I've seen some people on Twitter saying, like, how are we going to trade for Myles Garrett after what happened with Von Miller? And it's like, how are you missing the whole point? It was the right move then, and it was working, and it was exactly what they needed. And then he just blew out his leg in Detroit. Had he not done that, who knows what happens that year, because he was the piece that we needed. That's what we're doing again with Myles Garrett. You take the swing again because it worked back then. It just was unfortunate he got hurt. You hope that if you got somebody like Myles Garrett, he doesn't get hurt. You just have to hope, but you hope that with every single player on your team. So I don't look at the Von Miller thing and say, well, it didn't work then. We shouldn't try that again. If we're not going to try anything new, then what the hell are we doing? Like, you got to try something. Like, go get Myles Garrett.
Yeah. All right. So, cut Von Miller, cut Daquan Jones, cut Kaiir Elam, keep AJ Epinesa and Tyler Bass. I think we're all in agreement with that. Yeah. I'm all for that. All right. Extension candidates include Josh Allen, Greg Rousseau, James Cook, Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir, Christian Benford. So, hypothetically speaking, if the Bills don't trade for Myles Garrett or Max Crosby or some other disgruntled pass rusher or another, do you extend Greg Rousseau?
I don't.
Really?
He's going to want $20 million a year, and someone's going to give him $20 million a year. I don't think he's a $20 million a year edge rusher or defensive end. I think he's really good at a few things. I think he's a really, really good run defender. Mm-hmm. I think he has all the makings of an elite pass rusher, and we've seen those sparks. But, dude, his season high on sacks is 8. Like that's not good enough for elite defensive end money. So I don't extend him this year. Let him play out the 5th-year contract. And if he goes bonkers this year, like let's say he ends the season with 16 sacks, then I franchise tag him. And the Bills don't use the franchise tag, but this is one of those situations where it doesn't make sense to pay him right now, in my opinion. You let him play out the 5th year of his deal and then franchise him if you have to.
So if you don't pay him this year and then you franchise tag him next year, I mean, how much more money are you paying him next year then? Or on whatever his extension would end up being?
I don't know what honestly, I would rather roll the dice on that possibility because I need to see him take another step before doling out $20 million to him. I just don't see that he's not elite. And I'm not giving I wouldn't want to give elite money to a non-elite player.
It's a tough decision. I think I tend to agree with you. He is somebody that I like a lot, and I really appreciate his game. I think he does a really great job, especially on run defense. He's so good in run defense. And I think that he has some really good tools and can be a really good pass rusher at times. But like you said, there needs to be more consistency, right? And especially after he started the year with 3 sacks, right, against Arizona. It was like, ooh, this is going to be the year. And then it wasn't. And there's probably other issues that go with that. I mean, the interior obviously didn't help with that. But regardless, right, like he's not the closer. He's not the finisher that they want at defensive end. He's still a very good defensive end and does a lot of really good things well and can be a good pass rusher, but not the elite level pass rusher that he will likely be paid as.
Yeah, which sucks because I can see like he's got the physicality. You can see the raw talent there. He has to put. There's something missing. He's got to put it together this season.
That's fair. We've honestly talked so much about James Cook already that I'm just gonna skip over that. And if you joined the show late, you can go back closer to the start of the show to see more about James Cook. I feel like I already know your answer to Christian Benford. How much are you willing to give Christian Benford?
I don't know I don't even know what the top guys are getting paid right now. I mean, high teens. Like
high teens.
If you could get like, I don't know. I'd have to see that. I'd have to actually look at those contracts. But if the Bills got him for 17.5, I'd be like, yeah, that seems right to me in my head at least.
So that would put him more or less the closest one to that like type of extension would be what Diamador Lenore just got from the 49ers, which is probably appropriate given their respective skill sets and what they bring to their teams. I think that would be fine. I'd be okay with paying Christian Benford that kind of money. Can the Bills actually afford that? I have no idea. That's going to be the tricky part. But in general, we're pro Christian Benford extension being on this team in the future.
Yeah, he's good. He's really good. He's good at football.
He's a good football player. Good football player. And we like good football players. Khalil Shakir. I'm genuinely curious, and we're also running out of time, so we kind of need to push this along. But Khalil Shakir, how much money would he get on the open market? Because like we know that wide receiver 2s are getting like $20 million a year. Do teams think of him as a wide receiver 2? And does the fact that he was a 5th round pick play into this and his future contract?
The Christian Kirk, it's what my mind keeps going to. Is he going to get the Christian Kirk deal? But that was also weird. That was bulky, right? Being bozo.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know what people view Khalil Shakir as, but like, I like Khalil Shakir, but the contract's important here. Like, it can't be back-breaking. Like, I know people love him and are like, pay him whatever he wants. It's like, yeah, you're not paying him $20 million a year. He's not that wide receiver. So I don't know where he would fall, in my head at least.
I think that he's a really, really good receiver. And I think in this offense with Josh Allen in particular, like, he brings a skill set that is very important to Josh Allen, somebody who can is always open, essentially, and is super consistent catching the football. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate what he does. Is that replaceable? I don't know how replaceable that actually is. I don't know how easily you can replace Khalil Shakir if you do let him go. I don't know. That's gonna be one to keep an eye on, and I don't think they necessarily. Do you feel like they try to extend him this offseason?
No.
No. Fair enough. Lastly, Terrell Bernard, your boy, Terrell Bernard.
Yeah, resign him. He's a captain for a reason. Like,
yes,
they're gonna resign him.
I'm willing to give him kind of this, like, there's a group here among linebackers that's getting like 7 and a little more, 7.7 million a year. Your Pete Warner, Blake Cashman, Kenneth Murray type. I'd be okay with that. Might be willing to go all the way up to like a Drake Greenlaw, 8-point-something million. Maybe even a little higher than that. Yeah, I'm all good for bringing back Terrell Bernard, what he brings to this team. And I understand you're going to have to live with the fact that he's going to have some sort of injury.
Yeah.
So far, none of them have been, season ending or anything like that. But you're just going to have to live with the fact that he's a little injury prone. And but when he's healthy, he's a game changer on defense. And he does so much to get this defense in the right position. So I think that's important. Any last words before we sign off in like 30 seconds?
No, I just, for those not watching the Super Bowl, enjoy your day. That sounds wonderful. I unfortunately will be watching it.
No one's making you watch it. You don't have to torture yourself. Folks, thank you for watching the Cover One Roundup. It's always a delight to have you here, even during the offseason, maybe even especially so during the offseason. It is always great. Well, we have some things that are in the works right now for the offseason. We will discuss that as we get further along. Hopefully we'll have more guests as we get through this offseason together, because it's not just our voices you should be listening to. It should be other people, including people on this very network, including the Air Raid Hour, which will start their show in about 90 seconds or less. And you've got Under Review with Joe DeRosa. You have Disguised Coverage with Anthony. You have the Film Room, of course, with Anthony and Eric. And you have the Cover One Buffalo Show with Aaron and Eric. Uber, where can the people find you?
On Twitter at UberHansen. I don't know what content I've got coming out. Something at some point.
You can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. Folks, thank you all for joining us tonight. We will see you all next week. Bye-bye.